start the meeting now. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Strategic and Technical Planning Committee today, Monday, the 4th of March, 2024. And also welcome to any members of the public who are watching this on the live stream. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Robin Cook, Chairman of this committee, and my Vice Chairman is Councillor John Worth. Good morning. The meeting is being live streamed and the recording will also be available to view on the website after the meeting. Can I remind everyone that when you're speaking, can you please speak directly into the microphones so that you can be clearly heard and seen? We have 2 applications to determine today. The case officer will be invited to present the reports and recommendations. Next, I will invite members of the public who have registered to speak to address the committee, and each speaker has 3 minutes, and officers will or may respond to any matters raised as necessary. Following that, the committee members will be given the opportunity to ask questions of the planning officer before moving on to their debate. Just to do a few introductions for officers involved in today's meeting include Anna Lee, who's the Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement, Phil Crowther, Solicitor, Vanessa Penny, Definitive Map Team Leader, Carol Mackay, Senior Definitive Map Technical Officer, Anne Collins, Development Management Area Manager in the South West, Matthew Pochin Hawkes, I hope I pronounced that right, Matthew, Lead Project Officer. Joining us virtually online is Steve Savage and Paul Eastwood. And I see they are actually there, and if we need them, I'm sure they'll come in when asked. And last but not least, from Democratic Services, helping us here is Elaine, Senior Democratic Services Officer, and John Miles, Democratic Services Officer. I think I've covered everybody. Apologies, please, Elaine.
Thank you. We just have the one apology today from Councillor Rideout.
Thank you. Item 2 is to agree and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of January 2024. Is everybody happy that I sign those as a true record? Yes. Thank you very much. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Any members want to declare an interest at this stage or wait till further in the proceedings? Councillor Worth.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 6, I'm predetermined on this, so I will not take part as a member of the Planning Committee. However, I will speak as a ward member. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman, I'm the same. Predetermined, but I will speak as a ward member on item 6.
Just to clarify, in case they didn't catch the name, that was Councillor Jean Dunseith. Thank you. Public participation is item 4, and we have the speakers registered for today, and they have been told exactly what time they have, 3 minutes per speaker. There are no other speakers, I understand, Elaine, registered. No. Moving on to the substantive business, planning applications. Item 5 is an application to divert footpath 1 in Lyme Regis. And this is going to be introduced by Carol Mackay and supported by Vanessa Penny. And over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for a public path diversion order under Section 119 of the Highways Act 1980. The site is in Lyme Regis at the eastern end of the town. So the current route of footpath 1 runs from point A on the A3052 along East Cliff, so it's along here, across a parking area and then over coastal slopes and through allotment gardens, terminating at point B, which is here, which is on Spittles Lane, and this is a track which has no recorded public access. This is the current route of footpath 1 at point A looking east along East Cliff. And this is looking back towards the A3052. The footpath then continues along East Cliff. It then crosses a parking area before continuing through the coastal slopes. This is the view from the new footpath where it crosses the current route. This is looking southwest. And then from the same point looking northeast. And then this is the termination point of footpath 1 at point B where it meets Spittles Lane, which again, as I said, has no recorded public rights, although it can be walked on the ground. The proposed new route of footpath 1 starts at its junction with footpath 2 at point C, running along a surface path to point D. And this is point D looking back towards C, and then point D looking towards point E. So the section between D and G runs next to the seawall that was constructed as part of the Lyme Regis coast stabilisation works. The new footpath continues along the seawall, and then this is point G looking back towards point F. And at point G, the new route continues up wooden steps. So this is looking back down the steps to point G, and then from the top of the wooden steps looking towards point H. So from point I, the route continues along a crushed stone path. This is between points I and K looking south. And then the route continues up steps. This is looking back towards point J, and the gate here is to be removed before the order is confirmed. The route continues again along a crushed stone path to point K. And again, the gate here will be removed before the order is confirmed. The route then enters Charmouth Road car park. This is point L looking towards point M. So there are wooden bollards along the path through the car park, which separates the walkers from the cars. And this is point O looking towards point N. And then point P looking towards Q, where the new footpath connects with the A3052. And this is from point Q looking towards point P. So a public consultation was carried out in 2023 with all the registered landowners consulted, and notices were put up on site. No objections were received. However, alternative proposals were submitted by the Lyme Regis Society for the section of new footpath between points K and Q. However, after discussion with officers and a site visit, it was agreed that the proposed diversion along the edge of the car park was a safer option, and the proposed diversion is supported by the Ramblers. Part of the affected land over which the proposed new footpath runs is registered to Dorset Council, as shown by the areas shaded in purple. Therefore, in the interest of transparency, the application needs to be considered by the Strategic and Technical Planning Committee. Officers consider that the legal tests have been met. Footpath 1, Lyme Regis, is to be diverted in the interest of the public, as the current route is impassable due to coastal erosion, and in the interest of the landowner, as the current route is obstructed by allotment gardens at its northern end and a parking area on East Cliff. The new route is already in place, and the diversion will enable future maintenance of the proposed new route by Dorset Council's Green Space team, once the path is designated as a public footpath. The termination points are considered to be substantially as convenient to the public, as they improve the connection with the network of public roads and public rights of way. The order confirmation tests are also considered to have been met. The diversion of footpath 1 Lyme Regis is expedient in the interest of the public and the landowner. The diversion is not substantially less convenient to the public, as the increase in length is modest, the gradient and surface are more accessible than the current footpath, and the new termination points provide a good connection to other roads and footpaths within Lyme Regis. It is expedient to confirm the order, as public enjoyment of the footpath would be enhanced by the diversion, and the diversion would have no material effect on land served by the current route or over which the new route runs. So the recommendation is that the application to divert footpath 1 Lyme Regis be accepted and an order made and confirmed if no objections are received. If objections are received to the order, if they're not relevant in the context of the legal test, the order should be sent to the Secretary of State for confirmation without further reference to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. No speakers for this item, as I understand it. Therefore, just a couple of points of clarity before we go into member questions and debate. Welcome. Good morning, Councillor Shane Bartlett. You made it in the end. Thank you. And Councillor Dunseith, you did actually leave the meeting, and I don't think you were here sufficiently long enough to take all the information in, so I'm afraid you won't be able to take part in the debate and vote this morning, and neither will you, Shane Bartlett, of course. Okay. Who wants to kick this one off? Councillor Brenton. Before you do that, just make sure you state your name and ward for the benefit of those viewing on the live stream. Thank you.
Councillor Brenton, Litchett and Upton area. Can I ask the officers, this path is already existing. I'm pretty certain I have walked this path this last summer. So it's all on Dorset land, so we just built the path, did we? And then we're just altering the, map, the definitive map. Is that really what we're doing?
Thank you. Yes, so the route has been in existence for several years. It was constructed some time ago. This will obviously formalise the situation. The route is partly across Dorset Council land. There is some unregistered land as well, for which we would need dispensation from the Secretary of State. But all the registered landowners have not objected. So, yeah.
Councillor Bolwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor David Bolwell, Bridport Ward. I've had a good look at this one, Chair, and it passes the test. There aren't any objections. I'm struggling to find a reason to oppose the application, so therefore I'd like to move that we accept it, please, as it stands.
I'll take that proposal on the table. Thank you very much. Councillor Took, do you want to second that? Okay.
Not just at the moment. I have a question. This route's been in existence, as you say, for a little time. Could you show us the slide with the wooden steps, please? Now, they don't look particularly wheelchair friendly. Is there no way we can actually allow wheelchair access along this route or not? And for us to do that, if we've built this and we haven't built it to be wheelchair friendly, then frankly, shame on us. But I'd be quite interested to know if we can fix that. Thank you.
So we do have a duty to consider the needs of lesser abled people. However, the proposal that has been submitted, the application that was received, the route had already been constructed. There is an alternative route along the roadway which doesn't require any steps, but I'm assuming that it was not possible to make the route wheelchair accessible. I can't comment on obviously wasn't involved in the construction, but I believe that would have been considered.
You happy with that?
I don't see it as a reason to refuse this, but I think we really should be better than this when we're building routes. We really should be, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
If I can just respond to that, it's a fair point, and thank you for making it. However, I think there are two factors here. One, yes, we're obliged to consider alternatives, obviously. There is an alternative, which is via the roadway, as we've heard, plus the fact there was an extensive consultation held on this, and I understand, in fact, you confirmed there were no responses to that consultation, which would have been an opportunity maybe for those affected to make a comment. The point is well made, and I think these things have to be considered, but they're not always practical in the scheme of things, and in this case, there is an alternative. Councillor Coombs, waiting to speak.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman. Councillor Tony Coombs, Verwood Ward. I don't have any issues with this and I'm happy to second the proposal to grant.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Right, I've got a proposal that we accept the recommendation as shown. That's from Councillor David Bolwell, seconded by Councillor Tony Coombs. Take the vote on it now. So can you all show? Those in favour, please show. Those against? Unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Thank you. We'll have 1 minute, please, while operator changes reels. Okay, so item 6. This is application number P/FUL/2023/02446, land south of Cold Harbour, Chickerell, Dorset, DT3 4BG. It's going to be presented by Matthew Pochin Hawks. And just to spoil your moment, Matthew, I don't want to do that, but would you mind presenting from up here, please? Because it's better to present to the chamber rather than with people behind you. Thank you very much. And just for clarity again, just to remind you that both Councillor Worth and Councillor Dunseith are not taking part in the meeting. They will be here to speak as local ward members. They will then leave the meeting. Thank you. So whenever you're ready. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So this is a battery energy storage system application by 23 Energy. I'll take you through the presentation now, and this is the broad location of the site. It's south of Cold Harbour Road, between South Hill and Chickerell, and it's north of the Chickerell substation, which is here. The site includes the access from Cold Harbour, which serves the site and the surrounding agricultural plots. They are in this area, and the site is 500 metres south of Cold Harbour. The closest residential property is 350 metres to the east, here in South Hill, and the site is currently used for horse grazing. The application is by NG23, and it's not the proposal by Stratera. There's been some confusion on some of the responses that have come in, and I'll just outline the broad location of the Stratera site, which is for a 400 megawatt BESS in this location. But the site we're talking about today is for 60 megawatts, and it's here. So the designation and constraints: the site is outside of the defined development boundary. It's in an area of local landscape importance from the Chickerell Neighbourhood Plan. There's a public right-of-way which runs along the southeastern boundary that connects Chickerell and South Hill. And you have the overhead power lines to the west of the site as well, which link to the Chickerell substation. The site falls entirely within Flood Zone 1, and a small part of the access is in an elevated area of surface water flooding. The site also falls within a middle safeguarding area. So these are some photos of the site. 1 and 2 show the access from Cold Harbour, from the main road looking south towards the site. You then have, this is the route walking east towards the site, photos 3 to 6. And what you can see, this is the western boundary of the site, and you can see here the vegetation and trees, which divides it from the adjacent agricultural plot. So it's quite well screened, and just to point out the pylons as well. So looking from the northwest corner of the site, looking south, you can see the woodland here along the boundary, the western boundary, and also on the southern boundary here. In the distance, you can see the pylons, and further west, you can see the barn here, which is to the east of the site. Chair, I'm feeling a bit unwell this morning. I think I might just need a break, if I can be excused for a moment, but yeah.
I'll leave it entirely to you. You're presenting, so you do it in the pace, the way that you want to do it, okay? As long as we get the clarity that we need for everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll resume, yeah. Okay, so just, yeah, looking at these photos, I've been through those there from the access road. I'm not, okay. I'll just reshare my screen, 1 moment. Okay, there we go. We've seen that slide. And these are views along the footpath. So the footpath runs to the south of the site, and these look northwest. The first 3 photos there look northwest, and that photo looks northeast. And you can see the western boundary of the site here, which has got vegetation. You can see the pylons slightly further west of the site, and you can see the adjacent agricultural plot. View number 5 looks straight down the public right-of-way, and it's fairly narrow right-of-way here, which passes along the southern boundary of the fields. So this is the proposed site plan. The application is for a 60 megawatt BESS. The development comprises a level surfaced area of 40 to 50 meters here. That's a level platform. And within that level platform, there are 10 pairs of Tesla Megapack 2 batteries and transformers. Those are 3.5 meters high And you've got 5 pairs on this side, 5 pairs on that side, each with their own transformer. To the southeast corner of the site is a customer substation, and to the southwest are 2 larger transformers. The compound has space for the turning of vehicles, and you can see here where the tracking of a vehicle is shown to come in and out. And this entire compound is enclosed within a 3.5 metre high acoustic fence. Outside of the compound are 5 water tanks on the northern boundary by the access road. Access will be provided by this northern route. The orange line here shows the indicative connection to the Chickwell substation, and the remainder of the site would be landscaped. The development is proposed for 40 years, after which point the scheme would be decommissioned. This is the indicative landscaping on the site, and what we have here are wildflower mix to the west and south of the site. We have scrub planting to the north, east and south, and then around the eastern and southern boundaries is an area of woodland, and that blue path there just shows the public right-of-way, so there would be some woodland planting, tree planting along that boundary. Here are some sections through the site, just showing these to give a kind of appreciation of the height of the infrastructure and the boundary fence. So I appreciate they're probably quite small on the screen, but you have the Tesla Megapack battery units, which are 3.5 meters high, and you have the transformers, which are the same height. These first 2 views look north through the proposed development, and then this one looks longitudinally east through the site, and you can see those batteries are on a level platform with the transformer being the same height, all enclosed within a 3.5 meter acoustic fence. These are the water tanks along the northern boundary of the site. So there's 5 tanks in total. They are 2.1 meters high, 5 meters wide. They each have a capacity of 50,000 litres of water. And they've been added to the proposals during the course of determination in response to comments from Dorset Fire and Rescue Service. And the capacity exceeds National Fire Chief's guidance, which I will come on to in a moment. This plan shows the drainage layout. The drainage has evolved over the course of the application in response to comments from the Environment Agency and the Council's flood risk management team. The drainage would serve both the surface water drainage and also deal with contamination in the event of a fire happening. Areas of the batteries would be impermeable, and water would drain away into a sealed tank which is within the site. This plan shows access for HGVs. The applicant's undertaken a transport assessment which looks at the access from Coldharbour. We've got colleagues from the Highways Authority that can answer any questions on access here, but it shows that there is space for turning of HGVs within the site, and also the turning of cranes within the site as well. That's the swept path analysis for this. So Section 15 of the Officer's Report is fairly detailed, and that sets out the benefits of BESS and battery electrical storage systems. And their main function is to provide a balancing function for the intermittent supply of renewable energy on the grid. And as set out in the report, there's an increasing need for electricity storage facilities, and BESS is seen as essential to meeting that need as we decarbonise the grid, move away from fossil fuels and move towards net zero. So the proposed BESS is a 60 megawatt facility. It has a capacity of 1 hour, so that's 60 megawatt hours, and the applicant estimates that it could discharge almost 36,500 megawatt hours of electricity a year. So whilst all of that wouldn't be used locally, some of it would, to kind of put that number into perspective, that would serve around 8% of households' electricity needs within Dorset from the discharge of that energy from the facility. And through that, it would help to reduce carbon emissions and decarbonise the grid and tackle the climate emergency. The location is well suited for the Chickwell substation, which is to the south, and that's a regionally significant substation for the southwest. So I just put these slides together to contextualise the growth of BESS developments across the UK, and these plans were taken from the Government Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. And you've got 3 plans here. The one on the left shows operational BESSes of all sizes across the UK. The second shows BESSes that are under construction and awaiting construction. And the third shows operational, so it shows both of those combined, which are of larger scale, 49 megawatts plus. And overall, they show a growing pipeline of BESS projects across a range of scales across the UK. And just the final plan from the government department there, this one shows the number of the BESS applications that have been submitted and appeals lodged across the UK. And again, that indicates a strong pipeline of projects at the planning application stage across the UK, but they haven't been determined yet. Within Dorset, the council has granted planning permission for a number of BESSes, and these are on screen here. There's a 20 megawatt facility near Shaftesbury. There's a almost 50 megawatt facility near Mannington. There's a 6 battery unit scheme at Monkton Wild and a 100 megawatt scheme near Shaftesbury. So they total in excess of 170 megawatts of battery storage consented in Dorset. And we also have a number of live applications as well. So as well as this 60 megawatt scheme in Chickwell, there's the 400 megawatt scheme promoted by Stratera, which members will be aware of. And there's 2 other applications as well, a 47.5 megawatt scheme at Three-Legged Cross and a 32 megawatt scheme at Litcham Travers. Other recently consented sites in adjoining local authorities, there's a 488 battery unit scheme in East Devon, granted permission in January this year, a 10 battery unit scheme in West Somerset, and a almost 50 megawatt scheme near Minety, Wiltshire. So there are a number of applications within Dorset and nearby. So coming on to some of the technical aspects of this application, the site does sit within an area designated as local landscape importance within the Chickwell Neighbourhood Plan. That designation extends to include much of the area between Southdale and Chickwell, and north and south of Cold Harbour Road and west of the football stadium. The applicants produced a landscape and visual impact assessment. These are a couple of the extracts from the right-of-way, broadly showing the location of the site. And as we've gone through on some of the site photos, it's an open field enclosed by vegetation on the west, north and south. And you've clearly got the pylons in the periphery of the view. The top view here is also another closer range view from the public footpath further east. And then we have a longer distance view from Wyke Road as well, where the proposal would be seen within an urban context. So it's generally a limited and localised visual impact there with a well-contained site. In terms of health and safety, fire risk has been the main objection from members of the public, although there's clearly been some confusion with the much larger scale Stratera application to the west of the site. So in total, we've got 61 representations and 57 of those are objections. And how are local authorities meant to consider fire safety? Well, the National Planning Practice Guidance was updated last year, specifically in relation to batteries. And that tells local authorities 2 things. We are encouraged to consult with local fire and rescue services, which we've done. The fire and rescue services are on our local list and they provided comments. And we're also encouraged to consider the guidance produced by the National Fire Chiefs Council. That guidance, this is the extract from it. It's guidance for fire and rescue services. So in our case, Dorset and Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service, and that was published last year as well. It sets out lots of guidance on items which are relevant at the planning stage, which we can influence now in terms of the design of the site, the spacing of the units, the separation distances. So the guidance sets out details on units should be 6 metres apart prior to any mitigation. BESS facilities should be separated by an initial minimum of 25 metres from surrounding uses and buildings. There should be no combustible planting within 10 metres of a site. Emergency access, there should be 2 accesses to account for wind speed and direction. And water supply, there's a minimum recommendation here for hydrants delivering no less than 19,000 litres per minute for 2 hours. And that equates to 228,000 litres of water. Of course, these things aren't designed to catch on fire, but there's guidance here for mitigating that in the event that there is a fire. And the guidance also sets out elements which are less relevant at the planning application stage, including details on battery chemistry, safety features, testing, signage, fire detection, and venting. And in considering this application, officers have considered the guidance and sought design changes to make the application more compliant with the guidance. The main amendment being the inclusion of water tanks on the site. Officers have also discussed the application and design of the site with the Fire and Rescue Service following their initial consultation response. So just turning on to the key planning issues. The principle of development, the local plan policy SUS 2 identifies renewable energy and utility infrastructure as acceptable in principle outside of DDBs, defined development boundaries. Policy COM11 of the local plan relates to proposals for the generation of heat and electricity from renewable sources. And officers consider this is relevant. This is a relevant policy to this application, given this proposal would support renewable energy generation. And although not all of the energy stored by the facility initially would be from renewable sources, that would increase over time as the grid decarbonises, with the aim being by 2035. So the policy COM11 supports renewables wherever possible, providing that the benefits of development, such as contribution towards renewable targets, significantly outweigh any harm. And in addition to that, it sets 3 tests for any adverse impacts on local landscape and townscapes to be satisfactorily assimilated, residential amenity, and on biodiversity as well. And I'll come on to those later, but officers are satisfied that it is acceptable in principle under policy COM11. So in terms of landscape and visual impact, we've seen a selection of the site photos, and we have the report as well, but the site is a relatively contained site. And although it is within an area of local landscape report, and it is contained and it is well screened along some of its boundaries, the character of the site is influenced by the electricity infrastructure of the substation and the pylons around the site, and it's concluded that there would be a limited and localised visual effect from this development. It would be fairly low-lying, 3.5 metres, enclosed within fencing, and it would have tree planting along the boundaries of the site. There's no objection from Dorset AONB officer or from the landscape officer, subject to conditions. In terms of noise and residential amenity, the applicant has undertaken a noise assessment, and given the distance from the closest residential property, 350 metres, there's not considered to be a significant adverse impact on residential amenity. The BES would, however, be audible from the public right-of-way, but along that route, it's a fairly short section, and users are aware of the hum of the pylons and the Chickwell substation along that route. So it's not considered that the proposal would significantly detract from the character of the amenity of the area. In terms of biodiversity, the proposals would not harm biodiversity. There would be a significant biodiversity net gain. This was estimated to be 100% above the baseline by the applicant when the application was submitted, but that was before the water tanks were added. So with the water tanks added, there would still be a significant benefit, and it would be well above the 1% that is required to be delivered by this development. 10% biodiversity net gain has recently come in, but it doesn't apply to this application, which was submitted before that. In terms of highways, the Highways Authority doesn't have an objection to the proposals, and they conclude that the proposals will not have a severe impact on highways and no highway safety concerns subject to conditions. And the highway impacts would be mainly associated with construction, as there would be infrequent visits when the site's in operation. In terms of health and safety, that's been a matter that's been carefully considered by officers in accordance with the PPG and the guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council. The Fire and Rescue Services commented before the guidance was introduced, raising a series of recommendations and detailed comments to be considered. Officers have discussed the proposals with the Fire and Rescue Service and have amended the proposals in consultation with the applicant to bring the proposals into closer compliance. The distance from surrounding neighbouring properties would be far in excess of the guidance. The guidance stipulates 25 metres. This is 350 metres away from the nearest residential property. And although there is only one access to the site allows space to turn vehicles so that they could get firefighters so that they could get a downwind position. I just need to break my presentation for a moment. Apologies, councillors. Thank you, councillors. Thanks for bearing with us. I'll just reshare the presentation again. Okay, so I was just rounding off the section here on health and safety and talking about the distances from residential properties, which is far in excess of the guidance and accesses to the site. There would only be one access to the site, that's proposed to the north. And the prevailing wind is from the south, so that is not an ideal situation for access. But what the site does do, it has space within it to allow the turning of vehicles so that firefighters could reach a downwind position And because the site is a relatively small BESS site, there's options for firefighting around the exterior of the site, and because of the distance from the nearest residential properties, that position is considered acceptable. There are planning conditions proposed in respect of battery safety and management plan. The fire brigade said that battery safety management is essential. So there's a planning condition there to secure those measures, and the council would consult the fire and rescue service when that plan is submitted. And overall, subject to the conditions set out in the report, the application is considered acceptable from a health and safety perspective. In terms of pollution and flood risk and drainage, again, those technical aspects are considered acceptable subject to conditions. So overall, there are significant benefits of the proposal in terms of renewable energy, tackling climate change and the biodiversity net gain here as well. They're balanced against the limited harm in terms of landscaping and the non-compliances with some of the minor non-compliances with the NFCC guidance, and the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to these conditions. So I won't go through all of these. Happy to take any questions on them, but just to point out, condition 3 here is a temporary consent for 40 years. After that, the condition 4 would require the decommissioning of the site. There's the usual conditions on construction traffic management plan, number 5, and the construction environmental management plan, number 6. I've talked about the water tanks and the battery safety management plan, conditions 7 and 8. They're required to ensure that there are adequate firefighting facilities on site and that there are safety measures with the batteries. And then there are other conditions here on biodiversity, highways, manoeuvring, and the conditions which have been recommended by the Environment Agency on water and management of polluted any polluted water. And condition 19 here on noise, that's been required by the council's environmental health officer. So that concludes my officer presentation. Apologies for the stuttering my way through it, but I will take any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew, and I hope you do feel better soon. Right, speakers. First on my list is Dr. John Fannon. Are you here? Yes. You have 3 minutes, Dr. Fannon. When you're ready, if you press the speak button on the microphone, when you finish, press it again, switch it off. Thank you. So when you're ready, thank you.
Right. Okay. Oh, good morning, Chairman and members of the Council. I've been listening to the case officer's report, and I'm afraid there are a number of serious flaws. For example, in paras 15/14 and 7/2, the applicant claims that the BESS will discharge over 36,000 megawatt hours per year. This is unsurprising, but it is nonsense to claim that it supports 13,000 Dorset households. Energy is imported from the national grid and exported on demand back to the national grid. In fact, there are cumulative losses in the import-export process of perhaps 5% or more. This would give an annual waste of almost 1,800 megawatt hours. Energy already generated by fossil fuels and very expensive renewable sources. In para 17/2, the applicant claims a potential to service 8% of Dorset houses. Again, this is nonsense. All expended energy, exported BESS energy, goes back to the national grid. If the applicant expects you to believe these claims, he is either ignorant of what the BESS is for or feels he can pull the wool over your eyes. The 60 megawatt hours exported by this BESS, in fact, constitutes 0.07% of the daily national requirements. It's a tiny amount. But a small BESS can still produce a large fire, as was found at Liverpool. The chance of a fire might be small, but the effect on the surrounding area would be large. The proposed BESS has a back-to-back Tesla Megapacks with adjacent pairs only 2.5 meters away. A similar arrangement at Moorabool, Australia failed in 2021 when a pair of megapacks burst into flames. 150 firefighters spent 3.5 days protecting the others. A toxic cloud was produced that required lockdown over 30 square kilometres and up to 9 kilometres away. A toxic cloud from a battery fire at Chickerell could cover the whole of Weymouth and Chickerell. Now, DNV, a company acknowledged as independent experts in risk management, reckon that at least one failure will take place during the 40-year lifetime of a BESS. To conclude, any government's first duty is the safety of the people. Building these BESS contradicts that. There is no way that anyone can guarantee that a BESS will never burst into flame. It would be totally irresponsible to allow one to be built in this Weymouth-Chickerell area. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Fannin, and well within time. Thank you. And next is Helen Hazel, please. Same applies, 3 minutes, and press the speak button when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Battery storage does not differentiate between fossil fuels, solar, wind or other. For this reason, this scheme would not necessarily tackle climate change. There will be much disturbance to flora and fauna during construction of this site, and with the removal of hedges and the widening of the access point, this will take many years to recover. Article 8 of the Human Rights Act states, rights respect for private and family life. The disturbance to residents of Chickerell and Cold Harbour will be significant due to heavy plant machinery movements, which will affect the quality of life and well-being of residents. Cold Harbour itself is a rural road, therefore is unsuitable for these kinds of movements. Dorset Council has a duty of care to its residents. One battery would be one too many on this proposed site, which is close to thousands of homes, schools, a police station, football stadium, also a care home, to name but a few. A fire cannot be ruled out in the lifetime of this proposal. As has been publicised in recent months, electric vehicles and scooters have caught fire, and only last week there was a large fire at a battery factory at Chard. This site is wholly unsuitable for a scheme such as this due to the fire risk and close proximity to the aforementioned. Other members of the public, when being refused speaking slots, have asked CAG to comment. They have asked that the following concerns be raised. There is overwhelming evidence that lithium BESS endangers lives in the event of fire, and that a fire should be expected during the lifetime of facilities such as the one proposed. Centrica have advised against seeking to locate lithium BESS close to residential areas. The fire service say that they rely upon Dorset Council to monitor the spread of toxic fumes, yet Dorset Council appear to have neither the expertise nor resources to respond in the timescale that such an event would require. Having sought evidence of emergency plans at other BESS facilities, including one at Shaftesbury, there appear to be none other than for actual firefighting. While the BESS at Creekbeck near Hull may have an emergency plan, the information associated is withheld as being of national security concern. So how can the general public prepare for such events? The applicant provides no evidence to show that the layout proposed has been tested and proven to be safe and lacks verifiable supporting documentation upon safety issues. The proposal is close to many homes and campsites. Fire service practice appears to be ask residents to stay indoors. This was the case with a Chard battery fire last week. The scale and type of battery technology proposed is unsuitable for locations this close to housing. Without any proper risk analysis and without council departments being trained and equipped to advise the FRS, this application should be refused. I urge Dorset Council to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and spot on. Thank you. Next on the list is John Perrott. Thank you, Mr. Perrott. Yeah, I think you know the arrangements by now, so when you're ready, please. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee. Good morning, all. This isn't an outline application, and yet several of the 20 proposed conditions ask for additional information for subsequent approval. For example, a pollution control plan, a battery safety plan. It's important in the interests of democratic fairness and accountability that such safety information is placed in the public domain prior to making a planning decision. Shouldn't committee be aware of the content of such plans to protect the environment and residents prior to making their decision? Having read the case officer's report, I would like to ask the following. Why has the applicant not been asked for the risk management and emergency response plans deemed necessary by the NFCC? With regard to paragraph 16.46 of the case officer's report, how does a fire tender get past a battery fire in order to get to the vehicle turning point? How does defensive firefighting and the distance from residential property justify a single point of access against advice from the NFCC and the local FRS? Has the landscape officer been approached for comment on the latest site plans, which now include 5 water tanks with a capacity of 250,000 litres? The NFCC say these tanks must be at least 10 metres from the batteries. Can the case officer please tell me why he finds it acceptable for these to be only 3 metres away? Why, in the reasons for the condition relating to water tanks, does the officer say they are necessary to meet the NFCC's guidance to provide an adequate supply of water, when their capacity, even coupled with the use of a hydrant, is totally inadequate? Perhaps the case officer can explain to me how 250,000 litres of toxic water is not going to overwhelm a pollution tank that only holds 185,000 litres, and why this inappropriate sizing has yet to be identified. What mitigation measures, case officer, are in place between the battery containers that negate the need to achieve the spacing recommended by the NFPA and the NFCC? What toxic plume studies that contain real-life data, such as that available from the Met Office, has he used to enable him to confidently say that this development is sufficiently distant from nearby residential property to be safe? Is the officer aware that alternative sites exist? Committee, one of the highest priorities of any publicly elected body is the safety of residents. It's a material consideration, even though the case officer's report gives it such little weight. Certainly, without any regulations or statutory control, and with Dorset Council admitting their lack of appropriate expertise, it's sobering to say, councillors, and I wouldn't like the responsibility, but it seems the safety buck for residents stops with this committee. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Perrott. I'm not marking the timing, by the way. Next we have Councillor Brian Heatley from Dorset Council. Brian, when you're ready, same applies to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Brian Heatley. I represent Rodwell and Wyke in Weymouth. I entirely recognise that this is not in Rodwell and Wyke's backyard, but as it happens, I live in Upwey and Broadway, and I'm well aware that many residents of that part of Weymouth are concerned about the safety aspects of this. I'm also a Green Party member of the council. I am very concerned about climate change, and so I think that renewable energy is an absolute necessity. I want to make 2 points, really. First of all, that sometimes the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and yet we still want electricity to come out of that socket in the wall. There are various things you can do to achieve that in a mainly renewable system. You can find renewables that don't go on and off, like tidal or wave energy, but they're a long way away at the moment. You can use the grid to move electricity about because the wind will be blowing somewhere else, and we do that. But probably the biggest single thing is having sources of power you can turn on and off. At the moment in the grid, this is mainly done by gas power stations, You could do it with biomass gas power stations, but the big thing that's needed to fill the gap is batteries. Batteries will enable you to have power you can turn on and off, and you can save. So it's an essential part of the system. Let's talk about safety. First of all, you can't guarantee that these batteries will never burst into frames, but let's just think about the context at the moment. Any system that has energy that turns on and off has to store concentrated energy somewhere. The gas stations are storing gas. In our transport system, we have petrol in our cars, we have large amounts of petrol underground at petrol stations. We keep fuel in huge tank farms. We are thinking about keeping gas underground in Portland. All of these things are dangerous, and they're essential to having a continuous supply of energy. This is also dangerous, but I think we have to address the safety issue in the context of what we find acceptable in the existing system. I'm not a safety expert. I shall listen carefully to what's said on safety because obviously it's important, but I think there's a context we have to remember. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Next on my list is Helen Donnelly, who is the agent on behalf of the applicant. Again, when you're ready. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this planning application. My name is Helen Donnelly from Corollas Planning and Environmental Limited, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, 23 Energy Limited. I won't repeat the details set out within your office's report, but I would like to emphasise for members the key benefits of the proposal. And as you've heard, this application is nothing to do with the 400 megawatt battery storage project at East Chickerell Court Farm. In May 2019, the Council declared a climate and ecological emergency, and by 2050 planned to be carbon neutral. At a national level, the UK government is committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050, with the decarbonisation of the country's energy supply by 2035. Despite the efforts and progress that have been made to date, 2023 has been confirmed as being the warmest year on record, with average global temperatures nearly 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Therefore, it is imperative that we continue to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, not only to reduce carbon emissions, but also to improve the security of the country's energy system. However, renewable energy generation, such as solar farms, is intermittent, and energy storage projects, such as the proposed battery storage system before you today, have a key role to play as they store energy generated at times of low demand and feed it back into the national grid at times of peak demand. The application site has been chosen due to its proximity to the Chickerell substation, to which the applicant has secured a grid connection. The site benefits from existing screening, is not close to residential areas, and is not within a flood zone. The site is modest in size and currently not used for food production. The compound area will equate to less than a third of the site, and the remaining area will be used for landscape and ecological enhancements, including wildflower planting, scrub and woodland planting, all of which will be retained and managed for the operational period of the development, resulting in a significant gain to biodiversity. Fire safety is paramount to the applicant, and a number of the recommendations of the Dorset Fire and Rescue Service will be incorporated within a battery safety management plan to be secured by condition. The applicant has also reminded me that the landowner owns land to the east of the site, which could be used in the event of a fire for access by the fire service. As you will see within the office's report, there are no outstanding objections from statutory consultees, and your offices have provided a very thorough assessment of the application, weighing up the limited impacts of the development against the significant benefits, concluding with a recommendation for approval. Although the proposed development will be a relatively modest scheme, it will provide a meaningful contribution to the supporting the decarbonisation of the energy system. The scale and contained nature of the site mean that it can be delivered with minimal impact and be operational in 2026. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you will support your office's recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much. Right, to follow now, we've got the ward councillors who wish to speak, and first on my list is Councillor Jean Dunseith. And when you're ready, Jean, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. You've heard today why residents don't approve of this application and the reasons why, so I won't go into that too much. Only to say that residents are worried and they're frightened because the BESS is too close to large population areas of South Hill and Chickrell. The recommendation is to grant. If committee were minded to refuse, you would need to have material planning considerations. I believe the health and safety of residents would be a material planning consideration. We're concerned about the health of residents because were this BESS or some of the batteries to go on fire, it could not be extinguished by water. You can't put it out like that. It has to burn itself out, and it's called thermal runaway. The fire hydrant, which would be necessary to cool the battery down, is far away, and anyway, not at the required pressure. Hence, you have the water containers on site. The water runoff would also contaminate the ground. You've heard it mentioned, the toxic cloud by Dr. Fannon. Well, the smoke and the fumes and the dangerous gases would be released almost all over Chickrell and South Hill, and depending on the wind, the whole area of Weymouth. I'm concerned that the spacing between the battery packs falls below the 6 metre suggested identified within the NFCC guidance, and this can add further danger of the fires spreading. The absence of planning policy and regulatory regime, these developments are being brought forward before government legislation has caught up with them. I note the application has consulted the fire department, but their guidance, the fire guidance, has only recently been produced. And I feel that there is an element almost of the Wild West about the whole way this is going on. We've already been shown a map showing all the applications that have been put in and will be put in for BESS. To sum up, this site sits on the corner of a British Gas high-pressure pipeline. It is close to our electrical substation. Just a few weeks ago, we had a thunderstorm which hit the substation and blacked out parts of Weymouth. This BESS would be just a few metres away. Thank you, Chairman. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is, last but not least, is Councillor John Worth. Okay, John, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. Councillor John Worth, Chickrell Ward. In principle, I support the provision of BESS facilities as a solution to help with the UK net zero. However, this is the right solution in the wrong location. And some of those reasons are, it's outside of the development boundary, it impedes on the wildlife corridor, and it is against the Chickrell neighbourhood plan, all of which I think should be taken into consideration. But more importantly is the safety aspect. I was glad to hear from the planning officer that the containers are not designed to catch fire. That was a very positive point. However, historically, containers and batteries, unfortunately, do catch fire. When they catch fire, they are a major problem for the firefighters to contain and put out. But they have guidelines. One of the guidelines is dual access route. And we've heard from the applicant's representative that the landowner owns other land adjacent to it and this could be used. However, that access would need to be constructed to take a 26-ton firefighting vehicle. I doubt if the alternative access is currently at that state. Also, the fire chiefs recommend 6 metres and will drop it down to 4 metres with mitigation. None of these containers are within that specification. They're 2.5 metres apart. The reason for a 4 to 6 metre gap is to allow the firefighters access to lay equipment hoses in order to get to the seat of the fire. That is not being provided for. The turning circle is pointless if you can't drive your fire trucks past flaming containers. Without that second access, I believe that this application should be refused. You know, and we hear about Tesla Megapacks, and everybody thinks, oh, it's Tesla, it must be good. However, there have been fires with Tesla Megapacks worldwide, so they're not immune from catching fire. So I urge the committee to refuse the permission on the grounds of safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the speakers for the item. Now, officers, there's a lot to take in there, and I hope you can respond to some of the questions, if not all of the questions. There is a lot contained in what you've heard. It might also be prudent to hear from Highways, maybe relating to the access. So, Steve, are you on the call at the moment?
I am, Chair, thank you.
Okay, well, stand by, because there may be something you need to respond to on Highways, possibly. But we'll move to Matthew first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. I'll just try and give responses as best I can in the kind of order that they were put. So, yeah, Dr. Farron on the provision that this scheme would make for households in Dorset and the 8% figure referred to in the report and the presentation. I think that figure is purely illustrative to try and to give you an idea of the type of the amount of energy that could be output from this BESS development. Energy would go into the national grid. It would go along the distributor lines from Chickfrill. Some of that would be used locally, some of that would not. We can't say that it would all go towards Dorset residents, but it would go to the national grid. And the figures on the energy discharge were provided by the applicant, and they're based on a discharge of 49.9 megawatts. So below the capacity of the scheme, so they're on the conservative side there. There was reference made to the fires around in Liverpool and Australia. I don't know the details of those fires. I think we're guided by the guidance on the National Fire Chiefs Council and their comments on this application, and considering the distances from nearby residential properties. And I think I agree with the comment there that we can't guarantee that there isn't a fire. There's always a fire risk with any type of development, and without what our role is here is to try and ensure that is minimised through compliance as best we can with the guidance. There were comments here about the second speaker, Helen, about the scheme not necessarily tackling climate change. Section 15 of the report goes into this in quite some detail, and the benefits of BESS for supporting renewable energy are well founded. It is true that the development wouldn't just distribute energy from renewable sources. That would include electricity from the national grid, which comes from non-renewable and renewable sources. But over time, as the grid decarbonises, aiming by 2035, you'd expect that that should all be renewable in the future. There was a comment there about the proximity to schools and homes and other areas of the public. We've considered the distances in relation with the guidance, and that sets an initial minimum of 25 metres from other uses, and this is 350 metres from the nearest residential property, so it's well beyond that. There's a comment about fire should be expected. I don't think we can. I don't think we can say that a fire is expected, but fires do happen on BESs. But there are controls in the conditions here for the BES safety management plan. And there's a comment about the lack of safety information. The applicants provided some details from Tesla about the specific nature of their product, and we don't always get the specification of what batteries would be used when a development comes forward. And in this case, they have specified it would be Tesla Megapack 2s, and that's specified on the drawing. So we do know about their safety measures. And there's a comment also from the second speaker about the guidance about staying indoors. What happens in the event of a fire would be coordinated between the emergency planners and the fire service, and invariably there are always guidance to local residents when there's a fire about staying indoors. I haven't got details on the extent of what that might be. The third speaker, John Parrott, there was a question there about planning conditions and about needing to have those details up front before councillors make a decision. I think the conditions here, we've considered them against the normal test for planning conditions and against the guidance from the fire and rescue service as well. And I think what they say in terms of battery safety management plans is that they are essential, and we consider that reasonable to condition that at the as part of any permission. There's a comment there about access to the south of the site, and I think as I addressed in my presentation in the report, there is only one access. That is not ideal when there's the prevailing wind is from the south, but this is a fairly small site, and there is a turning space within it to allow for firefighting to take place from a downwind position. And from speaking with the fire brigade as well, their firefighting would be defensive. It would aim to cool adjacent batteries rather than extinguish a fire, which is very difficult to do with a lithium-ion battery. So it would be defensive. There was a comment here about the landscape officer on the water tanks. How they are within 3 meters of the batteries rather than 10 advocated by the guidance. We have discussed the water tank provision with the fire and rescue service, and they were invited to comment on the further proposals, but they didn't provide any comment there. I think we have three water tanks on the kind of northeast of the site, 2 on the west of the site, so they are they are closer than 10 metres than set out with that guidance, but we have discussed that with the fire brigade. The tank capacity, I think there's a question there about the capacity and some numbers, but I think they provide 250,000 litres of water, which is above the minimum set out within the NFCC guidance, and again that's something that we've discussed with the fire and rescue service. There's a question about what mitigation measures there are because the scheme is below. The batteries are closer than 6 metres from one another, and that is set out within section 15 not section 15 of the report, in the assessment section of the report, and there's quite a few different measures in there which help to mitigate that closeness of those units. And the reason for that distance is to prevent the spread from one battery unit to another. There's a battery management system, there's the vents and other mitigation measures in there. There's a comment about the toxic plume study and whether one's been done and whether I've looked into that. That is not something officers have reviewed. We haven't reviewed any toxic plume studies of what a fire might entail. We're guided by the guidance here, and the minimum distance of 25 metres from residential properties is as well within that guidance. And there's a comment about alternative sites as well. I think we must consider the application before us. We know there are a number of other BES developments across Dorset and across the country. This site is well located from an operational perspective, being right by the Chickwell substation. The comments from Councillor Heatley, quite rightly notes that they are needed for renewables as set out within the report, and they support renewable energy provision. That's also in section 15 of the report. And he's quite right to comment that we can't guarantee a fire won't happen on this development. I have no comments on the applicant's comments, and I was out of the room for Councillor Dunsea's comments, so I don't know if you've got any salient points on that.
Yes, in response to Councillor Dunsea's comments, we accept the proximity to the South Hill and Chickwell areas, but obviously, as we said, the nearest residential properties are 350 metres away, well beyond the 25-metre guidance. Health and safety and fire risk are a material planning consideration in the consideration of this application's determination. There were some comments about water runoff in the event of a fire and it being contaminated. That is something that's been addressed with the Environment Agency, and I would draw members' attention to conditions 16, 17 and 18 that are specifically related to that, and are to address the containment of any contaminated water in the event of a fire. There's some comments about the toxic plume, but Matt's already addressed those. I think that was it. Councillor Worth.
Thank you, Anne. And comments from Councillor Worth were about the application being in the wrong place, outside of the defined development boundary. I think it's outside the defined development boundary, but the policy does set out that electricity infrastructure is appropriate outside of those areas, and were it to be within the DDB, it would be much closer, likely much closer to residential properties. I think I've addressed the comments on safety from Councillor Worth, and it's acknowledged that fires do happen on BES developments, including on Tesla products. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors.
Fine, thank you very much. I don't think, unless there's anything you wanted to pick up there, Steve, I think probably was the query of access that I think Councillor Worth majored on part of it, whether you want to respond to that or whether you want to sit tight and see how the questions develop.
Chair, if I may just respond to that, if that's okay with you. In response to Councillor Worth's comments, obviously you've just heard the case officer has addressed the issues of fire safety. With regards to access for fire tenders and the like, you did see a swept path analysis which showed large vehicles accessing the access track from Coldharbour itself. The largest vehicle likely to enter the site is a mobile crane, which falls within the parameters of the swept path for the fire tender. So I can confirm that fire tenders can access from Coldharbour, manoeuvre down the track, and again, a swept path analysis has been carried out to ensure that these large vehicles can access the site and manoeuvre within the internal turning area. So that's the only clarity I can give you at the moment, Chair, but obviously any other questions with regards to construction or traffic generation, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. It's very helpful. Okay, members, over to you. Any questions, first of all, if we can deal with those, and we'll just wait for Councillor Worth and Councillor Dunsey to leave the chamber. A few moments. Thank you both. Right, first on is Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions, I'm afraid, and they're fairly detailed. And I approach this as an ex-firefighter. and the fire risk does concern me. I think there's three aspects of this. One is the likelihood of the fire breaking out in the first place. Second, if it does break out, its early detection. And third, once detected, the means of fighting it. Regarding the first, the report notes that Tesla website claims that the Megapack units are, quote, one of the safest battery storage products of its kind. Is there any independent verification of this? I'll take one question at a time, if I may.
No, that's fine. We'll do it that way. Yeah, thank you.
The council hasn't sought independent verification of those claims, no.
Thank you. Concerning its early detection, the Fire and Rescue Service ask that or state that fast response detection system is essential. And Tesla themselves recommend use of multi-spectrum infrared cameras that capture early signs of thermal runaway. The Battery Safety Management Plan asks for the provision of details of infrared CCTV monitoring on site. How will this work? Will it be automatic? Will there be constant monitoring? And would it not be simply better to stipulate what is required rather than asking for just to provide details?
So that's proposed condition number 8. There are CCTV cameras around the site, but it's not clear whether they are infrared cameras or not. So that condition asks for details of the infrared monitoring, and the exact details of how that would be used and how the early detection system would work is for the Battery Safety Management Plan condition. The fire brigade, quite rightly said that is essential.
Okay, and thirdly, my main concern is about the ability to fight a fire should it break out in the first place. Obviously, the Fire and Rescue Service says there needs to be provision for water supply, and Wessex Water have recommended the 3 water tanks which you show are provided. 250,000 litres sounds a lot. I did some quick calculations. If you've got 2 ground monitors delivering 1,750 litres per water per minute, those tanks will last for 143 minutes, 2 hours 23. Is that going to be long enough to deal with an outbreak of fire? And if it's not, has any assessment been made of the feasibility of the Fire and Rescue Service setting up a water relay, bearing in mind that the nearest hydrant is solely inadequate?
Thank you. We haven't explored the opportunities for a water belay to the site. The water tanks they meet the minimum necessary by the NFCC guidance, and we have discussed with the Fire and Rescue Service. And I'm going to have to pass over to you to carry on the question. So, apologies, Councillor Clayton, I must leave the room. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Matt's said, they meet the minimum in the NFCC guidance. Dorset Fire and Rescue Service haven't provided further written comment, but they have discussed the tanks with Matt and didn't have any objection to them. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Before I move on to my next speaker, who is Councillor Coombs, I'm going to ask, when Matthew comes back, we ought to have the recommendation slide on the screen. So if you can organise that while the next question comes in. So Councillor Coombs.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Coombs, Verwood Ward. I've got 3 or 4 questions. The first one is around the buffer zone for the gas. The report states that this site falls within the 150-metre buffer zone, and yet there's been no response from Southern Gas Networks. So can I just have a bit of an explanation to understand better what the impact of this battery storage facility being within that buffer zone and what are the risks?
Have we got any information on that?
Thank you, Chair. Matt may be able to add something when he comes back, but as far as I'm aware, we consulted the interested party, the gas network, as we're required to do on applications in this area. They set out particular buffer zones and we're required to consult them. And my understanding is they've not submitted any comments back to us and haven't made any representations of concern about the application.
Sorry, we'll refer back when the officer comes back, the case officer. But if you have you another question, Councillor Coombs?
I do, thank you. Do you have access to his presentation? There's a slide that shows what I would call the location plan, where you've got the full access down from Cold Harbour Lane, the site, and also, I think it's a photograph where you've got the potential larger site. This is about understanding the relationship between the two sites and the access.
You haven't got a slide number, have you, by any chance? No. They were fairly near the beginning of the presentation.
That's good enough. Obviously, as people realise, I live nowhere near this area and it's not an area I know well. However, I was quite interested in looking at the site access, the way that red line meanders around. The fact that there is a solar farm to the west. And can you re-indicate the site of the other application? I know the two are not linked, but I'm interested in the relationship between the two in the potential of a fire situation and that access. Okay, so it's the whole of the pale and of the dark green. Yeah. Okay. That obviously raises concerns that have already been mentioned by some of the speakers about one point of access in the case of a fire. Because if, for example, the other application was there's a fire risk there, there's a fire risk here, you've got the one point of access going between the two, and, you know, worst case scenario, if there is thermal runaway and the measures don't work, then you've got quite a lot of potential of fire leaping from one site to the other. And that really does concern me. The other questions, again, was about the water supply adequacy. We've talked about the tanks, but I picked up in the report on the fire service response that they suggest that drenches or fire service inlets within the battery modules may be a design consideration. Now, my understanding from that is that the water tanks should therefore have piping down to the batteries so that if there is thermal runaway, then they can start pumping the water straight away. You haven't got to then link something up and run a hose. That's my understanding. I wonder if I could have clarification if I've got it right, because if I have, then I think they should be including the drenches and service inlets.
Okay, before I move to the officers, just a comment there. I think, it's difficult to divorce the two, but as you know full well that we have to look at the application that's before us. I do accept the point that's made that it is difficult to divorce the two, but we have to focus on the one that's here and now. But thank you. Anybody want to pick up on the question about the drenchers particularly? And then maybe, Matthew, after that, go back to the original point that Councillor Coombs raised just before you left the room. So you happy? You happy with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was just going to say about the point about the other site. I mean, the other site hasn't been determined yet. There is no officer recommendation upon it, so we are considering only this site. However, I believe I'm right, Matt will correct me if I'm wrong, but the Statira site does have 2 points of access and wouldn't be relied on the same vehicle access as this site to access it, but it is a completely separate matter. In terms of the water supply, I will just get, again, Matthew to confirm this, but I don't believe there's going to be drenches from the water tanks connecting underground, isn't it, we're talking about, to the batteries themselves.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any inbuilt drenches in the scheme, and just on the access, the Statira development is obviously a separate planning application, but they would that scheme is served by the same access from Cold Harbour, but then once you access to Cold Harbour, it is served by a couple of different accesses around that site, but that is a separate application to this one.
The other point was, which I did already respond to, but again, if Matt can add anything, there's a question about the buffer zone to the high pressure gas pipeline, and it's within the 150 metres. I said I wasn't aware that we'd actually had a response back from Southern Gas Networks, unless there was any update, but that it had been consulted in accordance with our requirements, but had chosen not to respond. But just give Matt a minute, sorry, just to...
Yeah, I'm just reviewing the report here, and yeah, Southern Gas Networks provided no comment. They were consulted on the application, but they didn't provide comment. And the site, the batteries themselves don't fall within that, or don't fall on the line of the high pressure main.
Sorry, can I just come back on that, please? Yeah, sorry. I didn't quite catch that last bit of what you were saying. Is it the fact that this site falls within the buffer zone, but it's how close to that high pressure gas line that is my concern, and I can't get a feel for that?
I don't have the exact distance from that pipeline in front of me. I know it's to the northwest of the site. It does fall within 150 metres of that high pressure gas main, but the site of the batteries don't actually fall along that line, so it falls within the buffer zone. Yeah, Southern Gas hasn't provided any comment on that. Thank you.
Councillor Took.
David Took, Cranbourne and Alderholt. Gas buffer zone, could you explain exactly what that means? What mitigation is required? Or we have buffer zones around areas of great natural beauty, such as the Heathland, where you can't build within 400 metres. What do you actually mean by a gas buffer zone? And if we're falling within that buffer zone, surely there should be mitigation of some sort?
So we're in the zone. We are required to consult with Southern Gas Networks. We don't, unlike some other types of infrastructure, we're not required in this instance to consult with the Health and Safety Executive, which you can get for certain pipelines and for certain installations here. So my understanding is it's not a constraint. Any works on that road, on that pipeline, would need to take account of that gas pipeline, but it doesn't pose a constraint to the actual batteries on the site. That's my understanding.
You want to come back?
Okay, thank you. I notice you say we're not required to consult with other. There's a difference between being required to and being proactive and doing it, which I think really we should be doing. We should be pushing on these, not just sitting back and accepting minimum requirements. Southern Gas have not come back, so we consulted them and they have not come back to us. Have we pushed them for a response? Have we said, oi, we want an answer? Thank you.
Councillor, we haven't chased up that consultation response. They were consulted along with all the other consultees. We haven't chased that up. We did carefully consider consulting with the HSE, and they're not required to be consulted on this application.
Okay, well, I think that's been made clear anyway, the answer to that question. Any more questions from you, Councillor Took? Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. And if I could just take the opportunity to explain my late arrival to this meeting due to roadworks, which obviously is having a massive impact on traffic movement across this county yet again. And you are extremely aware how frustrating it is yourself this morning. Yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare, thank you. So, and it didn't show my device it was going to be a problem. I've got several questions. If I could move to the first one on page 49 at 16.56. It says the access route is subject to high and medium risk of surface flooding. Is this access going to be made available, or is it only going to be the one access onto the site? And does that present a significant risk to emergency services getting onto that site?
I guess we'll take them one at a time, Shane. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so that surface water risk is on the access route is an L shape, and it's on the bottom part of that L, which goes east towards the site where there is elevated risk of surface water flooding. The site, that's not a constraint for fire and rescue services, as there is another access around the eastern side of the site as well. So that is shown to be within flood zone 1 and to not have any surface water flooding issues. And depending on the depth of that flooding, fire and rescue service may be able to access absolutely fine through that access to the west.
I could come back on that one, please. So the other access site, would that be suitable to emergency vehicles? What surface is that? Is that just a mud track, or is it a made-up surface?
I'll just share my slide just to better illustrate where this is and what it is. But my understanding is the surfacing on that track is the same as what we have to the main access to the site. So let me just bring this up. So this is, just to be clear on where that surface water drainage elevated risk is, it's around this location. And what I tried to describe was this other access around the north and then the east to access the site from here. And this access is shown entirely within flood zone 1 without any surface water drainage issues.
So, Chairman, I'm given to understand the officers don't think there would be a hindrance to emergency vehicles entering the site from what they've said. Okay, thank you. I can move on to my next question. I'm just wondering why the landscape and AOB officers haven't taken into account the site and its context within the Chickerell Neighbourhood Plan, because it seems to have been ignored. I just want an understanding around that, please.
Yeah, my recollection was that the landscape officer did consider the designation within the Chickerell Neighbour Plan. In any event, officers have given that consideration in the landscape section of the report, and yeah, considered the impacts on local landscape.
Halfway through, how long do you want me to go on? Like, I've got more, as always. So I've got a question around the fire rescue service. So we saw the slide with the Turner circles, and it's already been pointed out by other members about having to drive past the battery containers that could potentially be on fire. I just wonder whether the fire services were actually consulted on the layout of the site, and if they were, what their comments were, because I didn't see them contained within the report. I take Councillor Worth's point about actually fire services need room to operate around a fire. They can't be operating within a constrained site. That poses significant difficulties for their operation and obviously for their health and safety of their members fighting the fire.
Yes, the fire and rescue service has been consulted on the layout of the scheme and the separation of the batteries. They have been consulted on that. The summary of their comments are within the report, and we have spoken with the fire and rescue service after those comments as well about having adequate space to turn their vehicles within the site.
The water tanks closer than the recommended 10-metre distance, and I might have missed it in the report, but what are those water tanks made out of? Are they liable to melt? Are we talking plastic or are we talking metal water tanks?
The material for those water tanks is unknown. We have the drawing there, which shows the dimensions, but the material is not known. Details of the water tanks. I mean, colour would need to be provided, and I suppose if that's a concern, the materials could also be incorporated within that amended condition as well.
Thank you. Presumably it's not very helpful if they're plastic. When we go to the consultees, I think this is something Councillor Took was picking up on. What I was surprised at reading through the report is the number of consultees that actually we didn't receive any comments from. Emergency planning, public health, Dorset Police, Scottish and Southern Energy substations, Wessex Water. I find that difficult to understand that we get to this stage within the planning committee and those consultees aren't offering any comment whatsoever that was contained within the report. You can have an explanation around that, please.
Yeah, we have consulted those parties in respect of Wessex Water. There was some engagement that the applicant did with them about their their water hydrants on Cold Harbour Road, and what that revealed is they didn't have capacity to meet what the fire service needed on the road. So that led to the solution on the water tanks. That wasn't a formal consultation response because it was dialogue with the applicant, but we've seen that correspondence. The other bodies have not provided comments. The emergency planning team, they haven't commented in relation to this application, but they did comment in relation to the Stratera application. That's a separate application, but essentially they would work in the event of a fire with the fire and rescue service to coordinate how that operation works. But they haven't provided a consultation response on this. Same for public health as well.
Yeah, I don't. How are you doing? I have got other speakers waiting, Shane. I don't want to stop you asking relevant questions. And actually, again, if I could just say the point that you're making, they are very valid that the councillor makes, because this committee hasn't had one of these before it until today. We did have one deferred last time, but not one for discussion. And I think this is something that's come out within the report about the, not lack of consultation, but the points that Councillor Bartlett was making about the nil responses on these. Now, if I can just, I know you're waiting, Councillor Brenton, if I can just ask the question really, with the other approved sites then that we have in Dorset, which you listed for us at the beginning, do I assume rightly or wrongly that they're either were non-committee decisions, or they were small enough that they went to the area committees? Because these questions, I think, are very important, the ones that we're hearing this morning.
Thank you, Chair. Those other applications in Dorset were delegated decisions.
Okay, well, I've asked my bit there. If you want to come back now, Shane, and then I'll move on to Councillor Brenton. Thank you.
Chairman, I've got other questions, but please go to the members and I'll come back later. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, Councillor Brenton, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. Mine are probably quite simple questions, but nothing's ever simple in these. It has, in the conditions, and I've just lost it again, it says on the access road. I was intrigued at the access road. Nothing is mentioned that I can see about passing points for HGV or fire engines, because you could end up with everybody going one way and the one vehicle that needs to get there can't get past. So I wondered if the design of the access road has been changed to put in some passing points. And also it says no gates. This is no gates to the site, or just no gates on the access road? Because the other thing is, these are possibly volatile objects, these batteries. Surely there is security fencing around, which cases would have to be gates. So that's one piece I'd like some clarification on. It's not a question and answer. But the other bit is, and I've just missed it again, we have this business of the spacing of the battery units. It does say that the recommendation is 6 apart, but it could be less if there are thermal barriers between the battery units. Are these in place? And what are they? What is a thermal barrier? But even then, it does seem to imply that 2 meters apart, or 2.5 meters apart, is well under recommendation. So they'd have to have super thermal barriers, I assume. Could I have some more details on that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Before I go to you, team here, I'll ask Highways perhaps to comment on the question about the access and the passing places, etc. Do you want to come in on that, Steve Savage?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We did initially raise the potential issue of passing bays along the access track, allowing for the fact that there are other agricultural and equestrian uses which utilise it. The applicant quite rightly came back and pointed out that the majority of the traffic that's associated with this proposal will be during the construction period, which is up to 6 months, and that operationally that it would probably be visited by a van very infrequently for maintenance purposes. So having taken that on board, the actual trip generation, the likely amount of traffic during the construction phase, I think the worst case in the first 3 months was between 5 HGVs and 10 HGVs a day over a 12-hour period. In the subsequent 3 months, it was predominantly deliveries for the transformers and the substation. So in answer to Councillor Brenton's question, that the traffic numbers are so low that we couldn't justifiably recommend a refusal if they didn't provide passing bays. But you'll see from one of the conditions which has been recommended, the construction traffic management plan, that we will not only be agreeing routing and timings and the like, but it also makes mention of potential traffic management or the use of a banksman, for example, to ensure that we can have safe access to vehicles. So having waffled a bit there, the simple answer is that the amount of traffic generated is such that we couldn't justify passing bays being put in, but we feel that a safe means of accessing the site will be secured for all road users or all users of that track. So hopefully that's answered the question, Chair.
Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, and then on the other points, Matthew, if you've got some, come back on those, particularly around the gates, wasn't it? Was one of them, gating, and a couple of other things that Councillor Brenton asked you.
Thank you. So the question was about the gates and should there be gates. The condition is condition 15, and that reads, there must be no gates hung so as to form obstruction to the vehicle access serving the site. Now that is a fairly standard condition there, and that there would be the site wouldn't be accessible to general members of the public. There would be gates there, but it would, the condition is meant to make sure that gates don't swing outward, and that forms an obstruction to the highway. It's fairly standard condition there. On the spacing of the units, there would be thermal barriers between the BES containers. I haven't got any further details on that, but there would be mitigation in place.
It's a comment on that. Assuming that they're in place, that these thermal barriers in place, doesn't really give us enough evidence to be happy with a very narrow spacing. So I would have liked more information on that. I'd just point that out.
Okay, well, comments noted. Councillor Took.
Thanks. Can I just confirm with the officers that if we have a fire at these units on some dark and stormy November evening, that we can get 3 or 4 appliances down that lane, back up the lane, and operating on the site, that there is sufficient hard standing and turning areas for them to work, for them to move, and for them to go backwards and forwards. And to say that we don't need passing places because the construction zone is only a few months, that's not the point. The point is you might need rather large vehicles moving very rapidly up and down there in an emergency. And if you don't have room for them to manoeuvre, then I don't believe it's safe. But I'd like to hear the officer's view.
I don't know if Steve wants to say anything, but there's obviously quite a long access track down from Cold Harbour, which obviously would allow quite a few vehicles to, get off the road and down there. They would be able to go beyond the access to the site itself from that track and potentially reverse in. We have the swept path analysis and turn on site. Do you want to add anything, Steve?
Through you, Chair. The distance from Cold Harbour to the start of the loop, which the case officer showed you earlier, is around about 250 metres, and then the loop itself will provide access from both directions to the site. So we're confident that the fire service themselves will manage the access and exit of vehicles for that relatively short distance, but we have the provision that the loop is available. So if one came in, for example, from the west, then the other vehicle could exit to the east. So again, we didn't feel that there was an issue with this, potentially, Councillor Took. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that clarity. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going to slide 1617 on the best sites that were across the country and in Dorset. I just wonder how many are actually online and how many can't be connected to the grid. And I couldn't see in the report as to whether this one's being connected to the grid or not. I know we tend to have a lot of these applications come in nationally, and they get passed, they get the outline permission. They don't actually get connected to the grid because the national grid is on its knees, basically, as it is in Dorset. So is this one actually being connected to the grid, or do they have a time frame of when it's going to be connected to the grid?
Chair, my understanding is the applicant has agreed a connection to the grid with the national grid. I mean, those are private details between them, but that is our understanding. In terms of a timeline for that connection, I don't have that, I'm afraid.
There is something in the report, I think. Was it 2026? It said in the report. I haven't got it on the screen here, but I think it did say connection in 2026. I take the point that you made because we've just recently had a scrutiny on grid connections generally and lack of, and that's a very important point. I think obviously this is partly due to the reason why the siting has been chosen here because of its proximity to the connections and the grid. But yeah, thank you. Any more?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, and the choosing of the site, yeah, because it's part of the minerals and waste policy, comes within their site on page 28 at 9.20. There is a known safeguarded material on site, which is cornbrash forest marble, but it appears now that that's of low level demand, and it's about. I was trying to understand why it's still safeguarded. It seems that it's convenient that it's on this site, but we're going to develop this site knowing full well that safeguarded minerals below it. We're not going to be able to touch it. I'm just wondering what's changed in that.
Before I ask the officers to come in, I think I've had a bit of experience on the minerals and waste going back several years, and I think the reason that this is a very, very rarely used mineral product, and it's unlikely, because normally when you get a planning application like this, you usually have the minerals and waste side of it dealt with first, and if there's any to be extracted, that would have to be dealt with before any other planning application goes ahead. In this case, I think our team, and you will bear out, but I believe the minerals and waste team in this case said that they were happy for it to be in that position, but perhaps you would like to confirm, officers.
Yes, Chair. It's not necessarily unusual. Things sort of move on and it depends on the demand for the material. But yes, the Chair's right. You know, we do have cases where, say, residential development's proposed and we put condition on requiring prior extraction to secure that mineral. But we not often, but we do get cases, not infrequently, where actually the resource is of not such demand or quality that they don't feel it would be a reason to either object to the development and potentially prevent it or to delay its construction by requiring prior extraction, basically usually due to demand, as the Chair says. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Because I've got some questions. Anybody else wanting to ask questions? Because I've actually got one or two of my own here. Some have been answered already, so you won't have to wait too long. But okay, well, I've got a couple of points here. All through the report and through the presentations this morning, we've heard that the fire thing is guidance only. It's not. It isn't set in stone yet. It isn't statutory legislation, and I understand that. And we based on discussions with the fire service using that guidance. And we're conditioned, if this were approved, to deal with that under a condition. So apart from the regular sort of enforcement that we face if a condition is not applied, with this fire safety guidance, and as these BES schemes develop, it's likely that it will become statutory, I'm sure. How would that impact upon existing sites if the guidance has been beefed up? I mean, do they then have to be beefed up to match it, or do they stay with the original guidance, please? I hope you understand. It's a bit of a convoluted question, but I think it's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Chair. I think, yeah, you're right. This is guidance. The PPG encourages us to consider it and consult the Fire and Rescue Service. So the weight to compliance and non-compliance with that guidance is for the decision maker. As to whether guidance would be made statutory, it's unclear whether that may or may not happen in the future. As planning evolves and technology evolves, new guidance does come into play. And some of that can be statutory guidance and prerequisites. Whereas what we must do is consider this application under the planning policy and guidance framework that exists at the moment. So it's hard to say how existing sites will be impacted by any future guidance.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the difficulty, but thank you for trying to answer that. But it is an unknown. But, you know, that is a concern. That is a bit of a nagging concern with this, because it is very much developmental. And things may change in terms of the guidance when it becomes statutory because of previous events that need to be tightened up. Anyway, I've laboured that one enough. The other point too about, we haven't heard a lot about the location. We've heard about the nearest habitation is 350 metres in this case. It's quite a long way. But how does this location, where it is compared to the other approved sites that we've got in Dorset, for example?
Chair, I can't give figures on how close or far they are from other surrounding uses. I can just comment on this application.
No, I'll accept that, because as I've said, it is this application we're looking at, but it does seem that we are well over the required minimum limit from the figures given, and so it hasn't been given much weight on this. Okay, that's my points. The one about the construction period has been answered, because I think Steve said it would be about 6 months when the bulk of the traffic is using it. So, okay, I'm done with my questions at the moment. Dave Bolwell.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a lot to think about on this one. Can I just do a little bit of background? Because obviously I've done a lot of research on this before we came here today. And I've come up with a few statistics, and I've got a couple of questions after that. But one of the things that struck me was on September the 15th of 2020, a fire at a BES site in Liverpool took 59 hours to extinguish. So bear that in mind. There's currently no definitive or preferred way of putting out a lithium-ion fire. There are in effect two main options: one to be let it burn, the other being to use significant amounts of water for a protracted period. So we're talking about 59 hours on that one. There was one that's taken another 11 hours to put out. At the time, there's a toxic gas given off. Now, if it's going to take sort of 11 hours and there's toxic gas given off, there's obviously some concerns of, A, the water volume, because I think Councillor Clayton mentioned that there was about 2 hours left of water for this particular site. So that worries me. You're going to have at least 9 hours potentially. There's not going to be enough water there. Secondly, going back to the response from the fire service, I read their report, very detailed report. It said that it's considered unlikely that the fire service resources will be in attendance within the time frame required to prevent a thermal runaway event once it's begun. And this is from the fire service, and it's quite clearly there. It says, once thermal runaway has occurred, defensive firefighting tactics would be the preferred option to allow the cell or module involved in fire to burn out and to protect surrounding modules and infrastructure. So they're going to try and defend the site, basically. So we're starting to get a picture of this. This will be undertaken on advice and with agreement from the Environment Agency and Technical Support Services. Now, this is getting very important here. The fire service are not responsible for managing the safety of the public away from the site. So the fire service state, that is an emergency planning matter for others. And the fire service state that they rely on Dorset Council Environmental Health to monitor the smoke and gas plumes and advise on the concentration of the toxins present. I ask, have we contacted Dorset Council Environmental Health for their comments on that particular statement? Thank you.
Okay, I'll respond to the stats and the questions as one as best I can. Yeah, you're quite right. My understanding from the fire service and about lithium-ion batteries is once a thermal runaway situation has occurred, that can happen quite quickly, and once it's started, it's very difficult to stop. So what the fire service have said in their consultation responses and told officers that they would employ defensive techniques. So they would essentially douse surrounding BES units with water to try and prevent the spread. And that unit that has the fire would be essentially allowed to burn out. And you see in the report there's some comments there about how these particular units are designed to do just that. The water provision, again, the tanks on site are the minimum, slightly above the minimum necessary. There's a condition there that's been worked up with the Environment Agency about contaminated water, and the exact details of that drainage would need to be worked up, including the capacity of it. The length of the fire, you comment on the other scheme. It's probably accepted that it would take a long time for the fire to end. And in terms of the fire service saying they're not responsible for the managing public safety, that would be managed in coordination with the emergency planning team. So the emergency planning team who sit within the council would help to manage that. And my understanding is that they do that for all incidents where there is a fire, and this would be as part of their management of that. There's a question about whether the environmental health officer has been consulted about one of the specific points of that. They have been consulted. And I think they've mainly commented about noise, and their conditions have been accepted. So if there was another query, if there's a comment there that I've missed, I'm happy to answer it.
You want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I realise it's a very technical and difficult subject, this one. I'm going to push on this environmental health situation. I believe that contact was made to Dorset Council Environmental Health on the point, and their reply stated that they have no competence to advise upon such safety aspects related to this BESS application. So that concerns me. If we've got the fire service saying they relied on Dorset Council Environmental Health to monitor the toxic gas cloud that's probably going to be part of this fire here, should it happen, and we don't seem to know what they're supposed to be doing. It concerns me. There's a lot of questions over safety on this particular application. I will say that I do understand the need for the battery systems, because it's already been explained, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, and we do need resilience in our systems, so I understand that. But I am concerned about that all we have in this application and others is guidance. And guidance isn't hard and fast regulations that we can actually say, we're happy with that, we're happy with that, we're happy with that, which is why you're getting all the questions from the councillors. Thank you.
I don't know whether you want to comment on that, or it's just really a statement, I think, that the council's made. Don't think necessarily. Is there anything you want to respond to?
Just on the EHO comments, and yeah, thank you just for reminding me of that comment. And yeah, they do say something like it falls outside of their expertise. But in terms of monitoring, they do commonly respond on air quality matters across Dorset. And I've got to say I'm not exactly sure about how their inputs to any monitoring would happen in this type of event.
Okay, yes, okay. You've got just make a point here where we've had a lot of questions, and they're very good questions. So thank you, members, so far. I think we'll probably begin to move into debate as well. I think it would be prudent, because I know Councillor Bartlett's also in the queue to come back. So I think at this point, yes, thank you for the questions. Keep them coming, but I think we'll incorporate debate now with it as well. So thank you. Yes, Councillor Bolwell.
Chair, I'm happy to pass to Councillor Bartlett.
Thanks for that, Chairman. I was going to use this as part of the debate, but actually there is a question around it, and it's at page 26 with the Environment Agency, and we've talked a lot about fire. I just want to move it to potential pollution of the ground and surface water systems. So at 9.3, the response notes the location of the site on a secondary A aquifer with contamination in the event of a fire having the potential to enter surface water systems. The response notes the proposal could result in the discharge of pollutants to both ground and surface water. The EA raised concerns with allowing contaminated effluent to drain through permeable gravel and over nearby ground, with the proposal to then manage any contamination through remediation following the event. And then following the serious battery fire, the EA considered contamination could be significant and widespread, making remediation of permeable gravel and surrounding surface soil potentially ineffective. And at 9.6, following the submission of further information and liaison between the applicant, the Environment Agency and Dorset Council, the Environment Agency provided a series of subsequent consultation responses. The most recent consultation response, 16th of January 2024, withdraws the EA objection, subject to planning conditions. The response notes that any emergency plan should be developed in line with the advice from the Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Service Rescue Service, and that adequate supply of water is provided. And what I'm struggling with here is that as members on the committee, we haven't got that level of detail. It's not there. We've been asked to determine a decision on something, but in worst case scenarios, we all know about that fire in that residential tower block that took place. And that was found that in part it was due to the fact that perhaps due diligence hadn't been done within that local authority. We're sat here determining a decision on something that potentially the risks involved around it could be catastrophic to the local environment. And I don't even know if that ground surface water on that aquifer is drinking water for the local community. I'm going increasingly more and more uncomfortable with the report that's in front of us and with the application that's in front of us, I'm afraid. I mean, where is that detail? Why haven't we got that in front of us? It's all very well saying, oh, it's all going to be subject to planning conditions, but it's our names that are going on this.
Okay, I don't know if there was actually a question in there, but that's...
There is, Chairman. Why isn't the level of detail there in the report? How are they going to remediate this? I mean, I'm somewhat surprised that the Environment Agency seems to have done a U-turn on this. They've got into conversations in a room somewhere, but as members, we don't have the level of that detail, what those conversations were.
There's a question about scrutiny of the conditions, etc.
Yeah, I think that the report summarises the EA's initial consultation response, and there's a lot of back and forth between them and the applicant and their advisors on it, though all those further responses from the EA are available on our planning register. They do comment about an emergency plan, and my understanding that's something that's produced as standard between the site operator and the fire and rescue service, and it's something that's produced when a site is almost kind of up and running. It's not. I haven't seen those types of plans produced at the planning application stage, but there's the conditions there about the surface water treatment and any treatment of polluted contaminants on the site. But it's quite a complicated drainage system of shut-off valves, and I think it's reasonable, as with other applications, to have that level of detail come through as part of planning conditions.
Yes, okay, can come back. Then I'm going to bring in Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's known within planning. This is sort of one of my things about flooding and how we manage water and what have you on sites, and this is no different. I think there was a comment made earlier by one of the ward members that it's the right solution, but probably in the wrong place. And because of the risk that there is with the ground and surface water contamination, I'm beginning to come to that conclusion myself. Thank you.
Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Chairman. I came in with some concerns, and I've listened to a lot of quite important comment about this application. And I have to say that those concerns have not been allayed throughout the course of the morning. So I'm going to test the water, and I'm going to move refusal. I note that under the NPPF section 14, that we should approve applications if the impacts are or can be made acceptable. I don't believe that this application meets that test. My reasons for refusal are all to do with the fire risk, which is a material consideration. The first one is about the layout, access and provision of water supply should comply with the minimum requirements of B5 of the approved document B, Building Regulations 2010. There's a statement in the report that says comply as far as reasonably practical. That to me is very mealy-mouthed and wishy-washy. My second reason is about the inadequate access and the fact that there is only one access. I understand that there is the potential of a second access in an emergency, but I think it should be, I'm trying to avoid saying the word concrete, but that should be set in as part of the planning consent, not a maybe if we need it, so that we actually know that we have got that confirmed second access. And the third one goes back to the water supply and the lack of drenches or fire service inlets to counter any thermal runaway on the rest of the site. Those are my three. I know that other members have picked up on other aspects, and if they wish to propose an amendment along those lines, I'd be more than happy to accept. But that's my start for 10, and I hope I have a seconder.
Before I ask for a seconder, can I just park that for the moment and just talk to the solicitor here, please? Take some legal advice. Okay, right. We've got your proposal. I haven't forgotten it. We've got your proposal to refuse for the reasons you've given, and we'll come back to that in a minute. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bartlett, you're seconding at the moment for the reasons that Councillor Coombs has given, which we'll get some written words hopefully shortly. But
yes, thank you, Chairman. I am. I also add to that, as I said, that the mitigation against contamination to the ground and surface water, I don't believe the level of detail was within the report to mitigate against that. And I don't feel then that this committee has sufficient information in front of it to make a determined decision on it for those reasons, for the risks that are involved. Thank you.
okay, well, before I take any more, well, I'll take one more, because what I'm going to do after that is probably call for an adjournment so we can, because we've got the right words here coming through, I'm sure. We want to get them a bit Morecambe and Wise-ish in the right order. And I think that's what we need to do. So we'll probably take a comfort break for 10 minutes or so. But if you want to have a quick word now, Councillor Bolwell, then we can come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A bit of a dilemma this, because other than the safety issues, we need this technology. We have made a commitment to the climate emergency, and it's all we have available at the moment. We need to be able to store this electricity, because when the wind turbines stop, we need electricity. So my dilemma is, with a bigger scenario of the climate emergency, trying to weigh this against the safety aspects of this particular scheme. And I don't find it easy. Thank you.
Okay, before I move on to any adjournment, I'd like to ask, first of all, Anne to comment, if she would, and then I'll come on to Phil.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Councillor Coombs, there's sort of three reasons for refusal. Referral to the building regs and B5. Unfortunately, we couldn't rely on a reason for refusal around lack of compliance with B5 of the building regulations, because BESs are exempt from building regulations. However, members might want to consider referring to their National Fire Chief and Council's guidance, because planning practice guidance does make it clear that that is a material consideration, but unfortunately the building regs are not in this case. And can I just ask for a point of clarification, because it's been referred to the National Planning Policy Framework, Section 14, and making the proposal's impacts safe and acceptable. I'm not quite clear what bit of Section 14 is being referred to by the member, please, Chair, if that could be clarified. Yes, and then we'll take it from there, Chair.
And Phil Crowther, did you want to add anything to that? No, you're happy with that. Okay. Councillor Coombs.
Okay, so in the report it says Section 14, meeting the challenges of climate change, flooding and coastal change, local planning authorities should not require applicants to demonstrate the need for renewable or low carbon energy and should approve applications if impacts are or can be made acceptable. So I was recognising the fact that we have a duty, unless there are other elements that outweigh, to support measures that meet climate change. So I'm accepting that as part of this. But it goes on, the report goes on to say on page 40 at 15.6, the environmental benefits have to be balanced against the environmental impacts of the development. And that includes carbon and construction materials, associated transport emissions during construction operation, and partial development of a greenfield site with associated landscaping. But involved in all of that are the elements that I mentioned as my reasons, which are about the inadequate access, particularly if there's an event of thermal runaway. That includes the lack of passing places. I'm sorry, if there's only one access, there should be passing places. There should be two. The lack of drenches or fire service inlets. And I take the point that we are exempt from building regulations, but it seems to fall between two, because it's not development, so therefore building regs don't apply, but then the HSE falls between that as well. But it was the comment in the document that says that layout, access and provision of suitable water supply complies as far as reasonably practical with the minimum requirements of B5 of approved document B of the Building Regs 2010. And it's that complies as far as reasonably practical. There is no surety at what level that will be, and I'm uncomfortable with that, and I think it needs to be strengthened. Does that explain my comments better?
I think we see where you're coming from with this, and I think what we do need to do is have that adjournment and get the words put into some sort of, I was going to say respectable order, but you know what I mean by that, don't you? Right? So we're not looking for reasons for refusal here. We're trying to just put your words into for clarity. I think that's what we'll do. Yes, I've been reminded that when Shane seconded it, he put in another reason into the mix. And you're happy with that to be included?
Say with my proposal that I was aware that there were other considerations from other members and I'd be happy to accept them, and that still stands.
Thank you. I'll only take a couple of hours of your time. I just want to mention paragraph 100 of the NPPF, which talks about public service infrastructure and delivery of it. And it does say that LPAs should work proactively and positively with promoters, delivery partners, statutory bodies to plan for required facilities and resolve key planning issues before applications are submitted. And I think the level of questioning we've got here shows that that has not actually occurred. We've got so many non-responses, even from our own emergency planning team, who've declined to comment. And I think we need to get back to all these people and say, we want your comments. We want to understand what you think, and we want your reasons for either commenting, not commenting because you think it's trivial and you don't care, Or are you not commenting because you don't know or you don't have time? What's the problem? Why are you not commenting? So we need to get more details from these statutory consultees, and we can't just let them, especially things like the emergency planning team, to say, oh, and the gas, no comment. It's not acceptable. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, it's 12:30 now. I'm going to suggest we adjourn now until 12:45. If members want to take a cup of break or whatever, go and get a cup of coffee. But can you make sure you're back here so that we start at 12:45, please? Thank you.
Chairman? Chairman, are we offline? We are. You might want to remind that there's to be no discussion. There shouldn't be any discussion during the adjournment.
There shouldn't be any discussion during the adjournment.
Okay, it's 12:45 and I'm asked an extension of 5 minutes. Are we all happy with that? Yep, okay. You can relax. Okay, I think we're ready to pick up again. Just before we move back into the business as it is, I think we'd just better take a vote on the extension of time because we're coming up to 3 hours in 10 minutes. So just to cover us, are members happy to vote that we carry on beyond 3 hours? Yes? Agreed? Fine. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, the officer's gone away to try and make something out of the words that Councillor Coombs had, and Councillor Bartlett added his in. And so I'm going to go over to Anne. Is it you're going to do the reason as you see it for refusal, and then I'll go back to you, Councillor Coombs, okay?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make it a bit bigger. Sorry, I just opened a Word document and realised how small it was. Hang on. Thank you. I'll read them out as well. So, first reason for refusal. Having regard to the provision of a singular vehicle access point to the site, lack of vehicle passing places, the layout of the site, and lack of provision of sufficient water supply, drenches and inlets for the fire service, it is considered that the proposed development cannot demonstrate that it will be safe for the lifetime of the development, having regard to fire risk and the proximity to residential development. I'll put a full stop there. Therefore, it would not comply with guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council on grid-scale battery energy storage system planning 2023, paragraphs 163 and 191 of the NPPF 2023, and policy EMV 16 of the West Dorset, Weymouth and Portland Local Plan 2015. In terms of the second reason, having regard to the potential risk for fire, and that in its event, defensive fire tackling measures would be taken, this would result in the discharge of a significant volume of water that would likely be contaminated to the detriment of groundwater and the natural environment, contrary to policy EM15 of the West Dorset, Weymouth and Portland Local Plan 2015, and paragraphs 180 and 191 of the NPPF 2023.
Okay, Councillor Coombs.
I couldn't have said it better, Chairman.
Agreed. Councillor Bartlett, seconder.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy to accept that. Thank you.
Okay, well, just before I move to the vote, just a comment from me really on this. I think it's been a really good meeting, and I think it's brought an awful lot of questions, members. As I said earlier, thank you very much for those questions. This is the first of this type that we've looked at, as I said earlier on, that we've looked at as a committee. And in my view, it's important that we get these issues right at this stage, because we've already seen there are 3 or 4 of these approved in use in Dorset, or going to be put into use, which we haven't looked at as a committee. So it's incumbent upon us. I mean, emerging technology is always difficult. We know what we know, but there's a lot we don't know about it. This is the thing. And I think it's incumbent upon us, wherever possible, to get it right and put down a marker for future applications of this type, which we know are coming forward. So I think on that basis, I'm going to vote in this as well. So I'll take the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation to refuse, as was shown on the screen and repeated just now by Anne Collins. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Thank you again for your input on this one. And thank you, officers, Matthew particularly, struggling under very difficult circumstances. Thank you. Right, item 7, urgent items. There are none. Item 8, exempt business. And again, there's no exempt business. Oh, yes, yes. I've just been reminded, for those watching online, I haven't forgotten you, but the application has been refused, and for the reasons that were put on the screen and read out by the officer a few minutes ago. And on that note, I think we close the meeting at 12:54. Thank you, everybody.